Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex Brubaker. Thank you for joining us in Harrisburg this evening. Before we begin, some customary housekeeping. As always, I'd like to encourage you to take an events newsletter up at the front of the cafe. We have a lot of upcoming events, including a notable gun control activist. One is planning to take down the NRA, and many others. All these events are free and open to the public, so we'd love to see you back at the Scholar. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's events. We are very proud to welcome New York Times bestselling author D. Watkins and Harrisburg's own Brandon Flood to the Scholar. But first of all, can we give a round of applause for the brand new Secretary of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, Brandon Flood. I think I can speak to the bookstore when I say we're very honored to have him as part of our community here at the bookstore and in Harrisburg. Our author for this evening is D. Watkins, who is the editor-at-large for Salon. His work has been published in the New York Times, The Guardian, Rolling Stone, and other publications. He holds a master's in education from Johns Hopkins University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Baltimore. He is currently a college professor at the University of Baltimore and founder of the Be More Writers Project. Watkins has been featured as a guest and commentator on NBC's Meet the Press, CNN's The Aaron Burnett Show, Democracy Now!, and NPR's Monday Morning, among other shows. Watkins is from and lives in East Baltimore. Jason Reynolds says of the book, in a time of blunt-bladed posturing and hyperbolized impact, we speak for ourselves as a sharp gash in the psyche of America. And Ibram Kendi writes that we speak for ourselves as an amplifier of low-income black voices who have their own voices and have no problem using them. Watkins dares us to listen. Huge thank you to Brandon Flood and D. Watkins for joining us at the Scholar today. So please join me in giving them a huge Harrisburg welcome.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I don't know if it's raining still or not, but appreciate you still supporting, and also you will also be able to participate in the dialogue as well. So, just briefly, in terms of what the format will be, is kind of a casual conversation between Professor Watkins and myself, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So, the first question I would ask or pose to you, Professor Watkins, is, while the title "We Speak for Ourselves" seems rather self-explanatory, I would ask you to take a moment to unpack what it was that inspired you to take on this subject, and what was the intent, or what should the reader take away from this?
So, first thing I want to say, I'm going to answer the question, but this is like the coolest. This is one of the most beautiful bookstores I've ever been in my life. I've been to a lot of bookstores, It's so nice. Like, just looking at the architecture and just the people upstairs, and they're like chilling, you know? Like, I love it here. So the title came from a simple situation, really. I used to, every once in a while, I used to do cable television. Sometimes they would call me in to speak on these shows, and it was a cool thing. You know, a lot of the shows are in D.C., and I live in Baltimore, so they'll send a limo to pick you up. It's like real extra. And you get to ride it in D.C. and ride it back home. And, and it's real cool because I'm not a rich person, so anytime the limo picks me up, it's like, oh, okay. So anyway, I go on the show, and I give them a commentary, and then I hit it back home. And you always want to watch a little clip of yourself once they post it to their website, because you want to see if you look crazy or not. Did I make sense? Did I say too many times? Did I say like too many times? And things like that. So this day was weird for me because when I looked at the clip, my lower third, which is actually like my label, my title, it didn't say D. Watkins writer. It didn't say Professor Watkins. It didn't say D. Watkins, author of the forthcoming book, The B-Side. It said D. Watkins, Black Lives Matter activist. And I was like, wait, what? And I know a whole lot of people who work with Black Lives Matter. Alicia Gosman is a great person. Like Patrice, like they're really, really nice people, but it's not fair for them to just add me to their organization. And it's not really fair for me because it's not what I do. While I have great respect for a lot of different movements and what a lot of different people do, I just don't really think it's cool to just throw everybody in the same box. And I think for networks, a lot of times it's lazy. It's disrespectful, but then it's also lazy because while these people may be doing great work, I'm on a whole, different end of this doing my own work, and you don't have to give me a label to, for clickbait, things like that. So that's kind of where the title came from.
Right. No, and that's a perfect segue. I know when you talked about protest in the book, and for anyone, and I'm sure most of you that I know have been involved in local protests in one way, shape, or form or another. And protests can be very nuanced. There's a lot of working parts, as you mentioned. Sometimes you can find out at the day of the protest that a new organization is involved, or that you're part of an organization. In the case of Professor Watkins, he was a member of Black Lives Matter. And I know the emphasis was on platforms. So certainly, especially with today's media, everyone is looking to consume news very conveniently. The whole tag of the whole phenomenon of fake news is a real and existing thing, as you said, certainly to see how you're being portrayed. Can you speak more to, and I think one of the quotes in the book was, don't speak for me, pass the mic.
Yeah, that came from Dr. Sayou Kabir. She said, we don't need a voice for the voiceless, just pass the mic. And I'm coming up, and so first, let me say this. I have so much respect for my disruptors and people who really organize protests. I've played basketball on concrete for a long time, and I've been shot. My knees and feet are bad. So, no, I'm not. I love you, Dr. King, but I'm not walking to D.C. Like, it's just not going to happen. But it doesn't mean that that's the only way you can be effective or you can make change. We need people inside the system. We need people to be public defenders. We need people who care about us to be prosecutors. We need people who care about us to get into politics. Like, we need people fighting on every different front. Wars are won when you have like-minded people on multiple fronts. It's not just one thing. And I think me coming up around this time, or me just becoming like aware to all of these different organizations and activist communities around this time where blackness is being monetized, where like everybody has activists in their bio. Like I was interviewing somebody at Salon, and they were calling themselves an accidental activist because they spoke out against one thing one day, and like they branded it and turned it into a career. But I'm like, there's people out here who really risking their lives for people, like people who are organizing and fighting to make the lives of people better every day. How dare you disrespect their craft and what they do by just acting like it's something you can do, one time and make some money off of it and then go do something else. So my thing is, there's space for all of these different people who are doing great things, and they all need to be highlighted, and we need to show love to all of them. And I'm not the voice. When you sit on stage like this, at times, like, you get labeled, this is the voice of, whatever. But like, I'm a voice. I'm a person with a perspective, and I try to elevate the voices of others as well.
No, and part of having an effective voice, and I know certainly in the case of your own career, there was a time. Now you're highly sought out for your opinion pieces. But there was a time when you were trying to break into that. Not where you weren't trying to become mainstream, but you had your message become mainstream. And I know part of education was a big part of that. You being able to effectively communicate yourself, communicate not only through your writings but also verbally. Now speak to the power of education. I know this, to put it in a local context here. If anyone here is from Harrisburg, certainly the Harrisburg School Board race is a big one this year, which, historically, really folks haven't paid that much attention to. But certainly we understand the power of education and certainly how that affects outcomes of our young people. So speak to how education was important and you being able to kind of not fall the same fate that many of your colleagues had, or the people that you grew up with, for that matter. I know you mentioned there was quite a few deaths, and you also mentioned there were two people, at least in the book, that you mentioned as adults that could not read, that were illiterate as well. So speak more to how important education is.
Education is everything. It's everything, and not just education in the general sense, but like social education, economic education, education on, your history and and putting all those things in context to how everything is today and why these systems work the way they work. For me, I would like to think that, I was a good student, not a great one, but coming up, I was a pretty solid student. I could go into a classroom, I could listen, I could take little notes or whatever, and I can pass the test, but I wasn't a reader. My friends didn't read. No one in my school read. When I talked to my friends who went to high school around the same time I did, and I asked them, like, yo, what books did we read in school other than Ben Carson's autobiography? And I'm not joking. It's called Gift of Hands. It's horrible. Like, once it gets to page 60, everything's downhill. But I'm asking my friends, like, because I've been to a lot of schools, hundreds of schools and prisons over the past 4 years, and my books have brought me there. The B-side, the cook-up, and now this book has brought me to all these different schools. And a heavy part of what I do is about, one, trying to get non-traditional readers like myself, interested about reading. Two, getting people to fall in love with their own stories and to be really, really excited about telling their own stories. And three, having experiences with children who never met an author before. So many kids never met an author. Like, you see all of these different professions, but they never consider writer as like a job because writers aren't really pulling up on them. So it's locked in. It's sewn into the fabric of who I am, and I've been doing this for a really long time. And just to go back to when I was coming up, I can tie my friends and my own us not being able to develop as critical thinkers because we didn't read is directly connected to every mistake we ever made. And I see that. I know who I was before I became a reader, and I know who I was after I actually learned that, my story is important. The stories of people who grew up like me or around places like mine are important. The stories of people who grew up totally opposite are important as well. And we have a lot in common. Like, you taught that you're so different from people all over the world, but at the same time, and not to be too general, but reading has taught me that we all pretty much want the same things. We just have different ways of getting to them. We all want to fall in love. We all want to make our families proud. We all get excited when the appetizer comes out of the restaurant. Everybody likes ice cream. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have all of these things in common, but yet we're taught that we're so different. And for me, reading made the world smaller, but then it also helped me really, really, really strategically assess the situation I was living in. Okay, so my school is bad, but it's bad for this reason. Police officers act a certain way in my neighborhood for this reason. Different people who don't really understand people like me or who look like me act like that because they see this on TV, that on TV, this on TV. They're not having those interactions and those experiences. So this is my world. These are the cards I dealt. And this is how I'm going to construct a plan to navigate through this world in a way that's smart, creative, cool, fun, and meaningful. And that happened through reading. So, when I learned that, and it didn't really strike me until after I wrote my first book, and I was on like a mini little book tour, and I was getting messages on Instagram from teachers at different schools, and they were telling me like, "Hey, we bought a box set of your book for our school, and students are stealing them." And I said, "What?" They said they're stealing them. I said, "Wow, I don't want students to steal, but the fact that they're stealing a book is phenomenal." That's crazy. Like, nobody's stealing the Crucible. You know what I'm saying? So that lit something, and that lit something inside of me. Somebody in the background like, "I'd steal the Crucible." So that lit something inside of me and said, you know what? Not only do you need to work harder at creating content that young people can connect with, but you need to figure out a way to get inside these schools and interact with these people, because reading changed you, so it can change them as well. And I'm so excited because with all three of my books, and this has already happened with the first two. I don't know what's going to happen with this third one because it just came out. But with my first two books, I've literally done events inside the jails. I've done events at Harvard University, and then I've done events inside eighth graders in Baltimore City Public School System. That's three completely different demographics that are all having the same conversation through their own lens, and every conversation was great. So, that's what education is to me. And the fact that I'm a college professor and I get to bring myself into the classroom and my own experiences to the classroom is just as important as like the stereotypical college professor with the cardigan and a monocle and a beard and like the Birkenstocks. Like, me and him, we both have great things to bring to the table. And when we're both on the same campus, our students are getting a real taste of what this world should be and what it should look like. And it's been like a great thing.
No, absolutely agree. I know in my case, I think you mentioned in the book, Sister Soldier's book, Codex Whenever, was kind of very impactful for you. First book that was very impactful for me was the autobiography of Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. We talked about critical thinking. A lot of people, you think of Malcolm X, you think of radicalism or a radical person, but if you really peel the layers back, especially at the latter part of his life, he was all about promoting thinking critically. And for me, that's where, and I'm sure the reason why you're able to, still lives in Baltimore, East Baltimore, still very much in touch and in tune with the area where he grew up. Same deal with me. I don't have a problem going into the most seedy bar in the city because, at one point in time, I used to say, especially I was living that street culture, if I didn't have a gun, I wouldn't go there. But whereas now I have no problem because I feel confident enough that I can diffuse the situation or that I can think critically enough to where I can neutralize whatever threats before me. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. That takes me to the next subject. It's a good segue for policy and politics. So we talked about who's setting the policies on the educational side, who's passing laws, who's enforcing who's providing oversight for our local police department and the culture that they foster. You mentioned, you quoted one thing in the book where you said access to information is class-based. And I know you also mentioned in the book, and it's something most of we're aware of, is the digital divide. For all of us here may have smartphones and Wi-Fi, but for some people, it's not a reality. And certainly, that does dictate what information you're exposed to and what information you consume. Speak further to that, the statement, access to information is class.
So I used to teach at this small, tiny, for-profit college, right, where like every professor was adjunct. And I was so proud to get this done. I paid me like $70 a week, but I was so proud to be a professor at the school lost accreditation and shut down. But at the time it had accreditation, and I was so proud to be a part of it because people who knew me from the streets and got a chance to watch me grow up to be this person to finish college and try to be a writer. I wasn't publishing no web, but to try to turn my life around, even though I was struggling like crazy, were actually in the college and students doing the same thing. So the average age student was like 50. And I was like in my early 30s, and I'm teaching at this school, and sometimes, so I'm friends with people from the neighborhood where the school was, but then some of my students were also like, they lived in the neighborhood too. So we were all like, we would have like card games sometimes. Sometimes I would just like pull up and we would just kick it. And one night, we were sitting there playing spades, and everybody in the house was fussing about or talking about, they just heard about how Barack Obama had took a selfie at Nelson Mandela's funeral. Now, mind you, the story was weeks old. So it blew my mind because it's like, there's no Wi-Fi. I've been in like 4 of these units, and nobody had like a cable router. And then all of the phones they had were like those flip phones. So they're not texting and downloading apps and sharing names. They're flip phones. And this is during like when iPhones was out. So it's like information is really class-based. So you can't be a part of some organization that's viral on Twitter or Facebook if you don't have Twitter or Facebook. You're not getting news stories fed to you all day long if your phone doesn't get news stories fed to it all day long. So even information is a luxury. Knowing things is a luxury. Some of the basic things that's happening on a local level is a luxury. So I wrote about it, and the essay, it went crazy. Like, a lot of people read it because a lot of people never really considered that perspective. And the most mind-blowing thing about the whole situation is the people who I wrote about in that essay never ever even heard of the essay until I bring it back down there to them and show it to them. It never came across their radar. So they're talking about it in the local newspapers. I think I did it was like the first time I ever did like television as a writer. And it was like Huffington Post or Huffington Post Live or whatever, whoever used to run the news thing. And it's scary how everyday information can be like a luxury, and these are things that people need to know. And so I wrote about that a little bit in the book, and I talk about that story. And I even talk about how that story even for me, a person who was in his 30s and working towards becoming a professional, you know, how it put me in parts of my own city that I didn't even know about. You know, it introduced me to people in my city who were doing things that could have potentially helped some of these situations, and I never ever would have came across them. There's people who work for the local newspaper that was writing stories about different situations or different groups of people in our city, but not even thinking enough to take a stroll through the neighborhood to see what's going on. And that's dangerous to me, because the first thing that came to my mind when I got aware of that stuff is, you know, when somebody's going to dig all of this stuff up and say, you know, what were the people of Harrisburg doing 200 years ago? And they're going to have Instagram, they're going to have Twitter, and they're going to have, you know, different little clips from whoever your local news is. But, you know, a lot of those stories, if they're coming from people who are writing them or who are putting them together that don't love the people and don't love the city, that's the lens that the history is going to be defined through. And that's dangerous.
Right. Yeah, and this is a good segue. You talked about becoming a professional and working in that space, meeting new people, broadening your horizons professionally. We mentioned one thing we talked about downstairs briefly was the ability to code switch as well. You know, we talk about the ills that affect our community, especially as they pertain to Black and brown males too. And how do we get to them? And oftentimes it's people who can identify with their experiences that can reach them. But by the same token, you know, if you kind of live this duality where you have that mainstream success. I think you mentioned you got invites to President Obama's dinner. You know,
but it was like it was a taping of a show with like 100 people. I didn't get no one fed me. Even the fuck, no one fed me.
You got a little bit. You got some access with certainly high profile people and different folks that are on a different end on a socioeconomic scale. But you're able to navigate those two worlds. And I know, you know, speaking for myself too, when you get access and you're in certain rooms and certain settings, you do have to. And how many here know what code switching is? First, let me ask that. All right. They're informed. Applause for we have that many informed people here. So for anyone who doesn't know what code switching is, it's essentially the practice of alternating between two or more languages. So if I can speak to hypothetical, I'll give you a direct example. So I was born and raised uptown Harrisburg. Certainly I can go on 13th and Dairy Street and be able to converse with residents in that area. And by the same token, I can go across the river to Middletown at some congressperson's fundraising event and also be able to switch the way that I speak and be able to relate to which mostly be about politics. So I know for you had some incidents when professionally where you saw the value of doing that and certainly benefited you professionally as well too. You know, sometimes it's okay to bring things from the past to the future with us, but speak more to code switching and the value of that, not only for you, but also for African, Black and brown males as well.
So one, I'm not good at it. That's what I'm saying. I'm not good at it. I try, and I'm not joking. Like I tried. Back when my first book came out, the publisher, the marketing and promo guy, who's a great guy, Bill. He's a great guy for what he is. Pulled me aside and said, "Look, I got you this big NPR interview, so slow it down a little bit. Sometimes you talk really fast, and all your ideas are great. They're so great. You have great ideas. But you want everybody to hear them. You speak so fast, right?" And his boss was like, what Bill's trying to say is try to stay away from the East Baltimore vernacular, but in a non-racist way. I'm not a racist. I marched with kings, but everybody did. So everybody did. So me, and I'm thinking like, you know what, you know, and this is just coming in the world of publishing is not Black friendly. You know what I'm saying? It's difficult, and you want people to hear your ideas, and you want people to accept them, and you want people who you can't really get a chance to have a sit down or a conversation with to understand where you're coming from, so that we can we can all have an idea of what's happening. So I got on the show and I really tried. I tried. Like I thought that I thought I was code switching, and so one day, and it went good. It went good. Like the interview went really, really well, and it was received well, and everybody told me they heard me on the radio, but nobody said like you sounded different. Like nobody said that. So one day I was walking down the street. I'm pretty sure I was in DC. I'm walking down the street in DC, and this dude was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And I said, and this is like, I'm not used to people like recognizing me when I'm not in Baltimore. Like I'm still not, because people don't really know who Wright is. So he was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" So I said, "Hey, what's up, man?" He was like, "You was on NPR the other day?" And I said, "Yeah, how you know that?" He said, "Yo, I was like, this dude real as I don't know what. He don't code switch or nothing. He sound like he just crawled out of something." And I was like, "For real?" He's like, "Yeah, man, yeah. I said to this person, that person, that person, that person." And he was like, "Yo, I love you, man." And he gave me like a hug and like all that. And I was like, that's crazy that happened to me. And from that point, I was like, well, just be yourself, because it is what it is. And I wrote a passage in the book about this guy who was like, he kept yelling. He was from the hood. Well, he was on the basketball court. This is Johns Hopkins. So it's like it's a bunch of white people on the basketball court. And like, I'm one of the only black guys, and he's like the other black guy. He's mad because he's lost. So he's yelling like, "No, man, no, you feel me? You know what block I'm from?" And I'm like, yo, these people don't even know what you're talking about. But I'm not saying nothing. And then one of his white friends came in, and he went from like DMX to Ben Affleck in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, so in the book I'm writing about how corny he is, but then after I wrote that, in my mind, I'm thinking like, maybe, what is this guy's life like? What is he being exposed to? What kind of reality does he live in where it has to be that serious and that deep? And I never really thought about his perspective, because I just thought he was such a clown that I never really thought about what life was like for him. And I've tried to be better about that. But the way he switched was almost scary, and it's crazy because you gotta have, as a black person, it's like you almost gotta have a triple consciousness in this country. It's like you gotta, you gotta be able to speak the language of where you come from, because these are your people. This is your foundation. This is your grandmother. Like, your grandma don't play that. You know what I'm saying? Like this, you gotta do that. But then when you go into the world, you gotta be able to understand that language. And I'm not talking about job etiquette. And I'm talking about like cultural, like different cultures and how they move and how they act. When I first went to college, I dropped out of school instantly because I've never, ever, ever had white peers. Baltimore is an extremely segregated city. So when you're growing up in Baltimore, who you play basketball with is black. The schools you go to are going to be all black. There's going to be like some white police officers and some white teachers, but everybody else is black. So when I'm walking through this college campus, and if I had like some ideas of what is it like to be a part of this reality or to try to assimilate into this world, maybe it would have been different, but I didn't have that coming up. So like when I first went to college and there was a bunch of white people, and it's like they eating mayonnaise and like camping and playing acoustic guitars, and I'm like, yo, what? Why is, and I'm saying hello to people, and they're like, and I'm like, yo, what is happening out here? So, I think, again, a person who understands code switching, not in a simple way, but in a more complex way, because different groups of people just aren't talking to each other. So like, we're not really understanding how we vibe. And the person who understands that might be able to articulate the problem with that, other than promoting phoniness. If that makes any sense. Like, it's not about trying to be something that you're not. It's about understanding your American experience. Your social context is your social context. Other people have a different social context. And if we're going to like not fuss and fight and, have these disagreements, we're going to have to understand that. And I think, I still think the dude is a clown that I wrote about, but I do feel like I should be better at considering like this perspective, because when I went to Watkins, I was in Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore. I didn't have to make friends on campus. I went home. People would like, we would have like little debates in class, and they would have to like make up because they all went out to bars together. I didn't speak to them in public. I didn't speak to my classmates in public. Like, hey, you're in my history. No, I'm not. Get away from me, nerd. No, No, but I didn't have to live on campus and go through that because I got to go right back to my neighborhood and whatever. So, you know.
Right, and this will be the final topic we'll touch on, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But it's the conversation, you set me up good with these segues here, man. But we talked about, you know, your experiences are what shape you. You know, so your experiences are maybe different from the gentleman who you mentioned, John Hopkins, but in your particular case, and even from the book itself, certainly without knowing you personally, you mentioned there's a lot of trauma in that book. There were a lot of folks that you were either directly impacted, whose deaths you were impacted directly or indirectly. Most of them, I believe, were by way of gun violence. So speak to, and certainly, you know, anyone here from the city of Harrisburg knows the same kind of deal in the city. Gun violence really isn't something that it is normalized now. Speak to how the trauma in your life personally, and many of those deaths that you mentioned, especially with childhood friends, have not only shaped you, but also how you were able to overcome, you know, the same fate that they met.
So, you know, one thing I want to say is that I didn't overcome, and no one in this room, we didn't overcome. We did not overcome. Gun violence is not an inner city problem. You know, it's an American problem. Different people from all walks of lives are being affected by it. And this country has a problem. Like, if anyone who would say, you know, if I come to you and say, look, a whole school full of kids were shot up, and you come back to me and say, you know, start talking about the Second Amendment, I'm gonna be like, do you have a heart? You know what I'm saying? And like, it's, you know, I'm not gonna lie. It's made me hate guns. Like, and I only can say this because I know what it's like to have a bullet rip through my flesh and what it feels like, what the temperature is, how it burns. It hurts. I know what guns have done to people. Like I've saw it firsthand experience. Like I've held people as their lives slipped away. It's you know, and obviously that's not what they're intended for, but you know, as my fiance and I just went to a conference the other day where the guy was just breaking down intention versus outcomes. The intention is to go hunting. The intention is to protect your family. The outcome is all of these people dying who shouldn't be dead. The outcome is our children in this country are in danger. Adults are in danger. People who go to church are in danger. The safest place, what's supposed to be the safest place in the whole country, is in danger. It's in danger. And for me, it's like, you know, I have a whole lot of, most of my connections are with young people in schools and young people who are incarcerated to a certain extent. And I try to have these conversations about it with them. I will hope that other people who have like access to people who aren't really represented in those populations, but are talking to how dangerous they are and what's happening, we'll talk to them. But I don't, you know, it's a sensitive topic for me. I'm confused. Like I don't know what's happening. Like every time I see these things happen on television, somebody being shot in the neighborhood or somebody being shot as part of like some mass shooting thing, I don't, you know, it's disheartening, and I almost wish they wouldn't report on it because it's like somebody seeing it and thinking, okay, I need to do that. I need to be the next person to get my name out there and do that. And as a result, people are being hurt. And I know it's a sticky topic. It's in a tough situation because everybody's not doing that, but the results are just bad. I struggle with that. Like I struggle with that all of the time.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up to audience Q&A right now. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll come around to you with the mic.
Oh, we covered that much?
Yes.
I think I have seen you or heard you described as an intellectual. You cop to that? And if so, is that a good thing? And how do we spread it around more?
Yeah, that has been my title on different things before, and I think we spread it around just by having conversations. Like I think that it's crazy because I did an event. It's Fort Myers, Florida. Anybody ever been there? Fort Myers. So I get off the airplane and I'm walking through the crowd, and that was my first time seeing like MAGA hats in real life. Like they were like everywhere. It was like 87 of them. And so I'm calling my publicist, and I'm like, am I in the right place? And she was like, no, just be yourself. They're gonna like you, you know. And I'm like, okay. So I get to the hotel and I check in, and then I walk over to the book festival. It was like right across the street. And you know, I try. The biggest thing for me is like when I talk to people who identify as public intellectuals or people who work in television and radio, and I tell them like, yo, go to the jails, like go speak at the jail, like go talk to people. You can't forget about the people that's incarcerated. And these are brilliant thinkers. These are talented people. These are special, gifted people. These people are people that these are stories that need to be told. You know, and sometimes they do, and they're always rewarded by it, and sometimes they don't, and that's part of their own reality. You know?
So, would you say Fort Myers, Florida?
Yeah, Fort Myers, Florida.
Okay. My question is Baltimore still, as you described it, segregated, black and white, and is it still like that?
Yeah, there's a couple of areas where like different people mix and mingle, but they're like artist spots. So that's art always has a way of like eating racism. You know, it's like, you know, like I always thought if you introduce people in the KKK to finger painting, they'll put their sheets away. You know? But yeah, I mean, segregating, especially when you talk about schools, when you talk about, you know, like I said, I've been to a lot of schools, and I've been to schools in black neighborhoods that don't receive the same amount of funding as schools in white neighborhoods. And those schools in black neighborhoods, they gotta work 20 times as hard because they have to learn Shakespeare and they have to learn geometry in the blistering cold with their coats on. You know what I'm saying? With a bunch of people in the classroom, whereas some of the schools in the white neighborhoods that receive more funding, obviously it's tax-based, obviously it's all systemic, but they get to sit around in circles and have bottled waters and 8 options to pick from, whatever their lunch is going to be, but everybody has an iPad. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, not just segregated in where people are living, but segregated in the resources and what people are receiving. And it's messed up. Like it's extremely messed up. And I think now I think that there's some young politicians coming in, and mind you, I'm not going to give them any praise until I see some results. But there's some young people who are seem like they identify with the problems more than some of the older politicians that we had. And it seems like they have a different proximity to the people that some of our older politicians didn't really have. So maybe we might see some changes. I don't know. I know that I have to do what I can to let people know that it's not fair. I have to do what I can do to get books to these young people. I have to do what I got to do to be as present in many schools as possible and make sure that that we're pushing critical thinking. We're teaching these workshops. We're showing how important being a reader is, reading voraciously and being a writer and telling your own story and being proud to share that story. And regardless of who's in office, I'm not exempt from doing that type of work. So I'm always going to love Baltimore, and I always think that, you know, we can always be better. But I'm always going to be a real harsh critic of policing, of education, of all of these different things that other people don't have to go through. You know, there's kids out here who can be like, yo, you got a problem? I'll call the cops. Then there's kids who are like, yo, I'm never going to call them. You know what I'm saying? And it shouldn't be like that.
Thanks. Also, access to information. You think of a couple of things you wish your teachers had done to promote.
Hey, before you answer that, who's a superintendent has a question? It's a rhyme and reason behind this question.
So this is guy named D. Watkins that has these books out. No, when I was coming up, there was a lot of Mark Twain, and there was a lot of There was, there was a lot of big workbooks, and none of these things had any cultural relevance. People will argue that we have to get our students thinking about experiences that aren't their own. I agree with that to a certain extent, but we must acknowledge that those cultural relevant experiences are relatable to somebody, just not us. So somebody's able to get away with it, and we're not. When I was in school, and I was born in '80, and I went to school in the '90s and all that. If you would have gave me books like The Coldest Winter Ever that we talked about earlier, and you would have gave me like Nathan McCall's Make Me Wanna Holler, if you would have gave me that in high school or even in middle school, I would have been a reader in high school, because relatable, familiar information is not intimidating. It's not where you end at, but it's where you begin. So if I get you used to reading with that type of information, now you're developing that skill. You're learning how to physically exercise and do the work. And I always try to I frame it like this. Black people make up about, 13% of this country, but are underrepresented like maybe a little under 1% literature. So our stories, they're just not out there. They're not out there. So anything you put in a book is like accepted as like the universal rule. So it gives you like a different type of authority. And if I'm never seeing my ideas or my culture or anything close to me in the books that I'm getting when you're teaching me that skill, I'm gonna think I'm not a part of the game. The little girls growing up today, they get a chance to see Miss Universe and Miss Teen USA and they get to see all of them 3 black women hold these big high pageantry titles at the same time. These weren't realities for little girls when I was growing up. And they run in the books and they're looking at a princess and they say, oh, that's a princess, she's pretty. Oh, that's a princess, she's pretty. But none of them have a nose like mine. None of them have hair like me. None of them look like me. Am I beautiful? Before they're even supposed to be thinking about stuff like that. So it's like, it's the same thing with literature. It's what it does. And I think, so what I've been doing, or what has been working for some of the schools I've been working with in Baltimore, is working really hard to get, and not just my book, but it's a lot of books that tell Baltimore stories, or that tell stories in general that the kids can relate to. And when they get the books, they read them in a day. We think they hate reading, but they don't. They just haven't had anything they can connect with and really see themselves in. And when they get them, some of the students who are quote unquote the worst students, or some of the people, and my phone is full of text messages of teachers saying, oh my God, I couldn't believe, this one kid I thought he was going to, throw me over the flight of stairs, but now he's reading all the books in my office. And I get these messages all the time because it's that simple. And I guess the other thing I would say to that is, or the other big idea I would connect with that is this whole idea of how on many plantations it was illegal for slaves to read. After Nat Turner's rebellion, it was almost banned universally. So some of these plantations you can steal and keep your life, or you can try to escape and you're able to survive, or you can even attack somebody and survive, but if they caught you reading, they would kill you. Because they don't want you to be able to conceptualize freedom and how powerful that is, how powerful thinking is, how powerful ideas is. We fast forward into 2019, and we have all of these kids proudly not reading, and we know that there's things out there that will help them connect to it more, and they just don't do it. I mean, so long story short, culturally relevant material, like material that the kids can relate to. Shakespeare not clicking, pull out them J. Cole lyrics. They're just as complex, if not more, and they tell great stories. You know what I'm saying? But culturally relevant material works. It gets kids reading, and then you can do cool things like I was at this school, Augusta Fells in Baltimore, and they used my book, The Cook Up, as me being a black guy from Baltimore, and they paired it with Frederick Douglass's. They paired it with the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and the kids ate it up. And I was reading their papers, and I'm like, I'm beyond honored because that's one of my favorite scholars, thinkers, and people of all time. But the fact that they wrote these beautiful papers, breaking the 2 stories down, giving analysis, talking about them, and having like complex conversations is amazing. That was amazing to me, and it worked.